and welcome. Oh, okay, I'm going to start that again. Hello and welcome to Heart to Hearts. It's so good to be back and discussing some of the things that are going on in our world and outside of our world. I'm here with Melly Rose, and we've got lots of things to discuss and share about what's been going on in our inner selves and also out in the world. So welcome, Mel, and would you like to introduce yourself a little bit?
Thanks, Sarah. Yeah, I'm just a healer and body worker and on the same path as everyone else. And like you, Sarah, just the one thing that working in this field does is it just allows you to see patterns unfolding, and it just it gives you some insight from the outside of the similarities and things that are coming up, which you can't necessarily see for yourself when you're on the inside of all these big energies that are showing themselves at the moment. So yeah.
Great, thank you. And I'm Sarah Seeger. I am also a body worker and healer, and yeah, I can totally get behind that way of looking at things now, because it's been a lot of stuff happening in the last couple of months, a lot of energy coming in, a lot of people experiencing similar things, but in different ways. And it's really interesting, isn't it, to be able to take a step back and be able to see that happening. And then when you can see it happening for other people, you can also recognize for yourself where your stuff is falling into those same patterns.
Yeah, totally.
Which is great, isn't it? Affirming, because then you don't have to carry this heavy burden thinking that you've got things right or wrong all the time. You can just go, okay, this is just what's happening.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, it really helps. And you definitely see what comes up for you being reflected in your clients when they come through, and being reflected in the general population, and it always helps you work through your own stuff.
Yeah, they're a gift, aren't they? Like, the clients just bring in so much for us to work through, and recognize in ourselves. I always think, like, they don't even know that they're just doing all this healing themselves. I actually just started saying to my clients that when they walk in the door, they bring the healing in with them. Because I just feel like my little cabin is like this little womb in which everybody can come in and they're all safe, but actually what happens in there is of their own making as well. Which is, I suppose, a little way of me taking a step back from being, you know, overly responsible for what happens in the course of the treatments. But yeah, really good response from people too, and understanding that that is what they're doing when they come. They've made that choice to do some healing on themselves, and then we're just the facilitators.
Absolutely. Yeah, that's so true. And something I do a lot is I ask people when they're sitting, just before I get them on the table, I ask them what they would like to get out of the session. And that's sort of my subtle way of getting them to set an intention. And so it makes them think, what do they want? What are they aiming for? What's the target? And we don't always end up going in that direction, because there's always a primary layer that needs to be unfolded. But usually when you ask them that, you find that they're actually quite in alignment with their primary layer anyway that's coming through. So they definitely bring that in. They're already setting, as soon as they make the booking, they've already set the intention. Their soul has reached out and said, I'm ready for healing, I'm ready to change, I'm ready to shift. And so yeah, they're bringing that healing right through the door with them. I love that.
Yeah. And I want to ask you something about, just with all of this stuff that's been happening, and in all of there's a lot of fear around the medicine itself, and around the what happens in the body afterwards, which has been a really interesting thing to navigate, because I have a feeling about it that I don't know, it's just my feeling and it seems right for me, but I certainly can see that other people have very strong feelings about, especially people who have been very concerned about the whole thing, as I have, but who have a lot of worries about what that does to the body and what that does to the people around them. So that shedding aspect.
Mhm.
What have you noticed anything? Like, what's your experience of this?
Yeah, so when it first came out, which was, I don't know when, about a year ago or whatever, what I noticed in terms, I didn't really believe in the shedding, to be honest, but I couldn't help but observe that over several months, if someone came to me and they'd had the shot within 24 hours, then invariably a day or two later, I would be horribly flu-like for about 2 days. I'd be shivering and shaking and frozen. I haven't had a flu in 25 years, but I was having these undeniable symptoms when I had hugged someone or been around someone who'd had it within 24 hours. So I had to come to terms with the fact that there probably was something to the shedding theory. And then, there was a lot of people noticing issues around the stomach and periods and that sort of thing. There was a lot of, there's a lot of fear on both sides of the fence. So my feeling is that, the dark forces, or whatever you want to call them, the ulterior sort of agendas that are going on, that they've really got both sides kind of sewn up, because everyone was in fear. You were either in fear of the Rona, or you were in fear of, the jab, or, everyone was afraid of something. And so that was the perfect storm for the planet, right? Is just to make sure that everyone was in fear of something. So it felt perfectly engineered to me. And I really came to understand that, just from my perspective, and just what I observed, was that the fear is the real virus, right? So as long as you feel like you're doing something right, as long as you feel like what you're doing is right for you, and you stayed out of the fear, then everything flowed a lot more. And obviously, there's been a lot of long COVID. There's been a lot of, the jab injuries, and within the field that we're both involved in, I've seen a lot of stuff, and so some of that has been asked in my channels around this. Why is this happening? Should we be afraid of that? And it was really interesting what came through, because what came through was that this was that the vaccine is like a gift. It's been a gift to the planet, because we've got kind of these layers of people. You've got people that are wide awake and angry, and then you've got people that are wide awake, and you go through these kind of stages, right, until you kind of come to peace with everything. So you might start off really angry and upset, and then you sort of work through these layers until you kind of come into some kind of acceptance of just where things are. But yeah, what came through was that it was a gift, because it was shaking both sides of the seesaw. And so it was waking people up on both sides, because there's people on our side as well that are really, not awake, not aware, that think they are, but they're still really stuck in the lower vibrational elements of anger. And I understand, I've been through all of that as well. I've spent, in the beginning I was very angry about a lot of stuff, but actually, it's been such a shake up to both sides that now we're at this point where we've hit the tipping point. It can't be stopped now, this beautiful awareness, this beautiful ascension that's happening. It can't be stopped. But it's a scattergram. So the way it's shown to me is a linear line, and dots everywhere.
Yeah.
And you're just one of those dots at some point on that linear scale. So it's a real scattergram. So it's not like everyone's just suddenly going, oh, we're going to ascend now. It's more like you are where you are on the scattergram, and you're coming into some kind of knowledge or non-compliance or acceptance or whatever you're coming into at any given time. That's just where you are. But everyone is now progressing. Everyone is moving. And because we're all moving, the energies are just mental, it's chaotic energy, and we're being shaken to our core with all our shadow work, and we're being forced into releasing trauma and working through our crap. There's no pussyfooting around anymore. It's like we're just being thrown into the pit of fire, and so everyone is just freaking out on that level now. It's like everything else is kind of dying down, but the shadows are coming up to be worked through. So I guess that's just sort of the progression that I've noticed.
Yeah.
And I don't know how you see it.
Well, much the same way, that's one thing I love, is that we don't talk for ages, and then often,
Yeah.
we'll put something out there and go, oh yeah, that's totally how I've been seeing things. Yeah, I've been similar. I've had people come. I haven't experienced a whole lot of stuff affecting my health from other people's, but I think that I have to qualify that a little bit, in that, we are empathic when we're doing this work. And so I think that possibly where I pick up things, it's probably more on an emotional level. Like, that's probably where I'm more sensitive in terms of being able to recognize what I'm carrying. So yeah, so I haven't been fearful. I haven't been fearful about either. There's always a niggling worry about when people keep telling you something. It's like they're almost trying to convince you that you should be as worried as they are. And in my heart, I can't get there. I'm just not willing to go there. And yeah, I just don't see it as being. I think I went through a real period of feeling very angry at other people. I was angry that other people were making choices that I couldn't understand. I couldn't understand why people would stand on the sidelines and not see where there was injustice. To me, it was all about injustice. And so that really upset me, because I just thought that I had all these people who I knew so well who would I just thought we all make the same choice. I mean, I'm very naive sometimes about how other people are. I do kind of expect that everybody is just seeing the world the same way as I do. So, this is a very good learning for me. So I haven't been worried about one or the other too much, although I have seen harm in people. So I can't say that there's no harm, probably on either, whatever you choose to do.
No,
But
that's right.
I think you're right, it comes out of fear again. And I know that when you put a real intention into something for it to be the best thing for you that it can possibly be, that's literally all you need to do. But you've got to believe it. You can't be doing it because you're scared of the alternative. You've got to be doing it because that's actually your true belief, is that you can make it whatever you want it to be. So yeah, so I'm seeing the same thing, people all over the place, in different places, with how they are feeling about things, and where they're sitting in that kind of victim mentality or warrior mentality, where there's so many shifts, aren't there? And people can change day by day. I think the big challenge for a lot of people is around family relationships where they've
Mm,
felt, aggrieved. But again, everything that hurts is another opportunity to learn more about yourself. And it's
mm,
always about, it's a very self-centered journey in some ways, because you've got to see it all as being an opportunity for you to see how you are in the world, maybe just reflected back from somebody else, but also having the boundaries to be able to say, well, that doesn't belong to me. That's just their stuff.
mm.
And, you
Well, I
know,
think that's definitely been probably one of the hardest things, is so many families have been really divided over this, um lots have stopped speaking, lots have stopped seeing each other, lots have not allowed someone to come in and see grandkids. And I know a lot of families in this position,
mm,
um and that's been incredibly heartbreaking and hard. But and the same with, some people have taken this jab in very, very good faith, very, very sure of, the fact that it's going to help them, and they have been harmed.
mm,
And, I've got a number of clients like that as well. Uh, But again, in the channel, this has come through as, the fact that some souls have actually chosen this contract
mm,
to allow themselves to be harmed, to highlight something,
that's right.
to a circle around them. So every circle that gets highlighted, right? So if you have one person and something happens, the sphere around that person then has an awareness of something greater that they didn't have before. And all of these become these light bulbs around the planet. And it's not that the jab is bad or good. It just is what it is. And but it's more around what's highlighting, and what's being highlighted is that the power structures that control the world are currently unelected corporations.
Yeah.
And so we no longer have our governments running the planet. We don't have the people that we elected running the planet. Those people are now really being run by these kind of global corporations, which is big data, big pharma, the NRA. I mean, you've got these kinds of corporations that are completely and utterly in control of the politicians, and you could say they always have been, but I would argue that it's at a different level now, where
Like the
our
balance is really
balance
shifted.
has shifted
Mm,
from, maybe a bit of you scratch my back, I scratch yours sort of thing, into these companies now control the politicians, and they are literally the puppets controlling the country. So they are doing whatever these ones want, because they have the ability to flatline governments in a second. And you saw that with Trump being deplatformed. If you can deplatform the president of the United States, and whether you like him or hate him, it's got nothing to do with that. This is about democracy and free speech. If
mm,
you can deplatform the president of the United States and actually get everyone on board with that decision that free speech is dangerous, then you're very easily controlled. And
yeah.
this is what Elon Musk is trying to highlight by encouraging debate on Twitter, by encouraging free speech, by encouraging the people that hate him the most to come on Twitter and put their points of view up. So, that's really what it's all about. Like, and yet now you're considered really brave for speaking your mind. So we all actually used to have reasonable democracy. We could speak our minds. We could say what we wanted on social media. We could actually have perspective. But now we are, we're being deplatformed for having perspective that does not go with a general narrative, and that's only leading in one direction, and that's communism, right? So, or an autocratic kind of society, which is run by, instead of a dictator, it's being run by big corporations. So yeah, I mean, I think that's quite interesting.
It is interesting. And I mean, I guess one good thing to remember is that all those corporations are run by people. There are people behind these things. So, but you're right. I think the balance is way out. And it's really interesting. I've just been reading a very old, it's not that old, an older book written by a New Zealand author about a man who is in the Presbyterian church, and he trains as a lawyer, goes into the church. And this is all in the 1910s coming up to 1930s, and it's his journey going through it's almost his awakening journey. And this is a fairly old book, so it's not like it's been written in the new age, although there's certainly an awareness of that in the writing. But it's even then they were it's led me to look at some of our early politicians that were who were very outspoken to the point of being imprisoned for having views that, like going against conscription in the First World War, believing in pacifism, and then getting into government. By the time the Second World War comes around, they're all enforcing conscription, they're designing weapons, these kind of things where it's just a fluctuation all the time, isn't it? And it's a personal fluctuation because we're always on this journey where certain things will influence us more. But I think you're right. This whole thing to me is about an opportunity to reclaim your freedom and your sovereignty, because what it highlights is no matter where you are, whatever decisions you make, the division aside, is how much are you owning your own experience, like how much control are you taking around it. And I think one of the great lessons for us when, with the beginning of the channeling and it's starting that journey was, I really feel like we had a good couple of years there. They solidly were teaching us about how to be discerning, how to have good boundaries, like that has been incredibly important.
Totally.
And I was reading, here I said to you before, I was reading some of those early channels today, and I was blown away. There was a question about Elon Musk, and this is from 2020, early 2020, about, and, and it was very clear. They said, like they are working with these people who they know can bring through the technology and the information that we need. So they being the galactic, higher, more advanced civilizations, bringing in that information, but also with a little kind of warning on the side, that we should be very careful. Don't put all your eggs in one basket. Don't follow people too closely, because they again can fluctuate whether they're coming from a good aspect or whether they're buying into a more service to self thing.
That's so true. Yeah, I do think those channels, all of our work, in those first couple of years in particular, was very much around discernment, learning to trust yourself over and above anyone else, so that you're getting back in touch with your internal wisdom, and really, I was just talking about this the other day, actually, because someone was saying, someone big online had been infiltrated, and someone was saying someone else had been infiltrated. And I said, you know what, like, we're all being infiltrated at all times. Like, the energy out there is trying so hard to stay in control, because now so many power structures are being highlighted, so many control structures are being highlighted, and they don't like being visible. They like to control from the background. And so, because it's all coming out into the light, and like you say, we also, everything that comes out externally is another opportunity to move something from the shadows internally out into the light. It all happens simultaneously, and it has to happen together. You can't have everything change outside and you haven't dealt with any of your crap and expect to ascend. That's not going to happen either. But, you know, because there's so much going on energetically, the chaos is the gift, but it's creating so many infiltration opportunities because of all our shadow work, and because of the shadow work on the planet right now, that no one is immune. I'm not immune. You're not immune. Elon Musk isn't immune to infiltration. Like, anyone can be infiltrated at any time. Any psychic, any channel, you know, anyone at all can be infiltrated. And so to think that we are somehow immune to it and Puritan, and then to criticize someone else, well, you know, we can be dipping in and out of infiltrated energies on a regular basis, which is why you have to learn how to protect yourself, why you have to learn how to clear yourself, and why you have to learn how to discern those energies so carefully that are coming into your life, whether it's through friends and family, or whether it's through colleagues or clients, or whether it's through what you're watching on the screen, which is probably the easiest way for you to be infiltrated. As soon as you are latching on to someone as your guru, as someone with all the answers, and you're reliant on them for giving you advice on how to move forward, then you are immediately removing yourself from your own sovereignty, giving your power out externally, and putting yourself into a vulnerable position where you're almost certainly going to be infiltrated at some point. So yeah, I couldn't agree more with that.
I was thinking about some stuff last week. I think I was having this internal argument, you know, like discussion with myself about trying to understand, especially this thing and the mandates and all those things, and trying to understand what that process was about, and how it's very hard to step back and to see it without being really judgmental. And the message I got through was that morality is really unhelpful in this space. So, and by morality I mean probably the, you know, the commonly held beliefs that we have around what is right and what is wrong. And I mean, there's still universal law, which is just, you know, like, you can't change that. That's the true measure, I would think. You know, like, you know, love is God, God is love, and, you know, those things still will remain true. But in terms of humanity having morality around, you know, like the whole, that's how the division is created. It's like, you're immoral if you don't protect your old people, you're immoral if you don't wear a mask, you know, all of these things. And it's like, and then from my side looking in, like, it's immoral for everybody to keep wearing masks because it creates more anxiety, you know, like, I could see all my judgment coming up and going, that's how the division wins, is that we get stuck in this belief system that there's right and wrong. And, you know, there is, of course there is right and wrong in some ways, but probably the extreme that we're at in society at the moment of believing that something is absolutely right or absolutely wrong, because we're just missing so much. We're missing out on so much life because we can't actually even look at something that differs from our own belief system.
Yeah, totally. And I think that, you know, it's interesting. Like, I used to think history was so boring. Why would you study history? Now I'm like, I must have been priming for this, because over the last few years, the last 5 years, I've voraciously read books on history, on this, you know, last 500 to 700 years in Spain, last 100 years in China, Second World War, not so much on the First World War, but a little bit, you know, some of the great wars. And plagues and things. I've been voraciously absorbing this information for sort of the last 5 years, and now, as soon as everything sort of hit, all the sort of trust the science. Well, I think Russell Brand just said the most brilliant line ever. People say you've got to follow the science, but the problem is that science follows the money. And I just thought, what a great line, if only we really understood the depth of that comment. But, everyone thinks that science and politics are kind of the most important subjects at the moment. But actually, I believe that we have never had more need to study history and psychological warfare than we do at the moment, because if you look back over the last 700 years, you cannot help but see the pattern that we have fallen into, exactly the same as we have over and over and over and over throughout history, which is where we are, the government convinces us that there is a life-threatening problem, a threat to our well-being and welfare in our financial institutions, and then creates a focal point for everyone to focus on, and gets everyone drawn into that focal point, and they demonize anyone that does not agree with that focal point. And so you immediately polarize the nation, and as soon as you've polarized everyone, you become the loving state. So everyone starts turning and having more loyalty to the state than they do to their family and community and neighbors. And so you get that whole narc on your neighbor thing. And as soon as you've got that loyalty to the state, then they're fantastically in control. And it's not actually, communism is really just a new name for something that's been playing out for hundreds and hundreds of years, and it was never called communism before. But whether you're looking at the Spanish Inquisition, where, you had all these black, very severe looking men in their big black hats roaming the country with their huge books to take everyone's sins down and write them down in these big books, and encouraging everyone to come and tell their sins. And when everyone had told their sins, then they wanted to know if anyone hadn't been down to tell their sins. So everyone would sort of point at someone, say this person hadn't been down to tell their sins. And that was terribly dangerous, because
oh God, it's just like Beijing.
Yeah, how could you absolve a village of sin if you had sinners in the midst that hadn't come down to confess? So then it became the witch hunts, then it became, so there was always a focal point, whether it's Jews, whether it's blacks and whites, whether it's, religion, and now it's a virus. It's exactly the same story playing out over and over and over, and we all fall for it over and over and over, because we all think that we're far too clever to ever fall for such a silly thing as racial division. But people forget that, with racial division, how mean we could be, how it preys on the worst part of us to, if you're white, then it's quite easy to become, a part of that racial divide, because you're not the one suffering, right?
Yeah.
So it was very interesting when I had a vet appointment during the mandates, and I walked up and they immediately came out and wanted to know where my pass was, and I didn't have one. And I could have used a fake one, but I didn't want to. And because I wanted to observe, right? And they were like, okay, I'd ask you to stand back, walk back to your car, please get in your car, close the door, call us, and we will give you permission to bring your pet up to the entrance. Then please immediately go back to your car. And then when you're back in your car, we will come out and we will take your pet inside. And then we will leave a form. Please don't leave your car again until we're inside. Then you can come back, sign the form, and go back to your car. And I was just sitting there like, wow, this is this is how it was during the apartheid, right? This is how it was actually for Jews long before the Second World War. They were being tormented like this. In you know, a number of countries, and I'm not going to name those countries, but yeah, that was going on long before the Germans actually invaded. But I was thinking, this is what it was like during the apartheid. You know, like, I'm going to hold this space because I want to feel this. I want to acknowledge this. And I know that I've been through this before. And I've probably been through it on both sides of the fence, to be honest, because we have lived everything, right? You know, we haven't just lived pure past lives. So I wanted to feel it and absorb it, and I wanted to acknowledge it and own it and hold it. I wanted to hold that space, and it was a very empowering moment to that awareness, without judgment of those people.
Yeah, I love that, because I feel the same way, that I've purposefully almost put myself in positions where I am challenging them, the people who are on the other side, to actually have to deal with me, you know, and I'm not rude, but, you know, but I am inconvenient, and I'm more than happy to be inconvenient, you know, because actually it makes me feel like I'm doing something without trying to upset anyone, but I'm just trying to show, this is the thing, this is the stuff. When you tell me that you won't, I've been in your shop for 20 minutes and now you must put a mask on me before you'll continue this conversation, you know, like, yes, this is the
You've been in
moment.
the shop for 2, 3, 5, 10 years, and all of a sudden you're not
That's right.
well.
And then I'm like, yeah, you go ahead, yeah, let's let you bring this out, because you need to see how you are behaving. And you know, and I'm going to be annoying, but I'm not going to be rude to you. And then at the end of the day, you know, we have to weigh it all up for ourselves, don't we? But yeah, I like what you said about it being empowering. I think it is empowering. I think if you can be detached from it a little bit, so that you're not offended, and you're not, I guess that's the thing, is when you, like you said, we've been through this before. When you've been through this before, and it might be other situations in this life, it could be past lives as well, or future ones, hopefully not. Um, but you know, like, that you just kind of have to see the absurdity of some of the behavior that's happening, and just, you know, and have a little bit of lightness around it, because there's no point in falling into, don't fall into the trap, you know, that trap is being set, and you've got the ability to say, well, I'll just manage myself and we'll see how this works. You know, it's a really good thing to be able to take a hold of, but you've got to be in the right space. You should never try and, you know, go out and try and be a warrior when you're already angry. That's not going to work.
No, no, it won't. It just gives them more ammunition.
Yeah.
But yeah, it was, you know, it's been a very interesting time, and really it's, you know, again, it's just highlighting everything. So everything is being brought into the light, and we've been given another opportunity to ascend. So I feel that in the past, you know, we haven't had that ability to get out of the darkness because the vibration of the planet was still too low. But now we're in this, you know, this photonic band of energy in between these two 26,000-year cycles. There's so much power at the moment that is pulling everyone. It's just pulling us to examine everything, which is why there's just chaos everywhere, which is why there is just 1,000 different opinions and 1,000 different views and 1,000 different theories. And none of it actually matters as long as we are doing the inner work, because the more you clear, right, then the less you sit in judgment, then the less you are likely to comply with something that doesn't resonate with your inner truth. And, you know, there's there's a lot of people that really felt, that they were doing the right thing by having, the jab. And that's great, because they felt they were doing the right thing. And so there's no judgment around that. And so, I just say to people all the time, whether it's chemotherapy, whether it's a jab, whether it's anything else that they're questioning, I just say, make the decision. And once you've made the decision, be okay with it. Make peace with the decision.
Yeah.
See that decision as being empowering and fantastic and wonderful.
Yeah.
But what you don't want is for a decision to be divisive and breaking down a community, because everyone, I mean, in the past, if you've had something like the racial divide or the Jewish divide, it's not something they could do anything about. I mean, you couldn't be suddenly un-Jewish or un-Black. So, the choice was taken away in those situations. But in something like the Spanish Inquisition, you could suddenly pretend you weren't a herbalist and go and, say your sins. So, and I'm sure that, it would have been very tempting to do that rather than face the persecution of not doing it. But in our situation, we had a choice, and for a lot of people it didn't feel like much of a choice. But ultimately, if everyone who had questioned it or not felt right about it had actually stood up, then it would have been quite interesting to observe that level, because I know there was a lot of people that really didn't want it and just did it to hold a job and that sort of thing. And I completely understand. But imagine if the full level, because you had situations like the ports where they were mandating and they had such a stand up and walk out.
They backed off.
Yeah, that they backed off. So
Yeah.
there was a number of quite big corporations that actually had to stand down, and they had the firefighters really fighting back. And so when you actually come together, it's the people that have the power, every single time.
Well,
And
I've got this feeling that we've had this little training for this, because I believe that they're going to try it again. I don't know whether it's going to be the monkeypox or whether it's going to be something else, but I'm pretty sure they're going to try again, and it will be interesting then to see where the lay of the land lies, because
definitely.
I think now there's so many people who just are starting to question everything. And I like your idea, the thing of history, because I've done the same thing, and I went through a really long period where I wasn't really looking at anything past. And then in the last few years, I've started to really research and read more and more, and getting back into reading has been a gift. But just that thing of also having to go, this is an interesting perspective, but it may not be the truth, because I don't know what the truth is anyway. But, like, it's really great to be able to go and have a look at all of these different perspectives on things that have happened in the past. And if you read something that was written about, I don't know, like the Irish conflict with Protestants and Catholics, if you go and read something that was written about that in the 1940s, it's going to be different to something that you read about it that was published in the 1980s or more recently today. So, and I don't know, have you ever read Malcolm Gladwell? He wrote a book called The Tipping Point.
Oh, yes.
Yeah.
Yeah,
And
I have
I mean, he's a
read that.
great example, right? Like, he writes this stuff and he puts a totally different spin on something, and you're like, whoa, I just never thought of it like that. But again, I don't know that it's necessarily the truth, but it's very interesting to be challenged and to make you look at something in a different way. And that's, more and more we want to be able to have the capacity to do that, because we've got to choose. It's got to be our own choice. But you can't really make an informed choice unless you get informed, right? So the whole informed choice and the whole informed consent thing in medicine for years has meant you take the opinion of your carer, your main person, whoever that might be, and they give you their take on it, you might go off and do your own research, but basically your information is provided by the people who are providing the treatment.
Yeah.
So we've
Yeah.
had a very narrow funnel into what informed choice and informed consent looks like.
Well, yeah, I believe in New Zealand that we haven't had any informed consent whatsoever. I mean, in the States, you do have a sheet of paper, apparently, with a number of risks and things, and you are given that so that you do make, informed consent. But here, I mean, it was, done out of hot dog stands and things, and
Oh yeah, with this one, yeah, absolutely.
with this particular one,
Yeah.
yeah. So the informed consent was completely non-existent.
No. Yeah, I mean, that was my big bugbear coming out of midwifery, where I think that, again, you're always limited by the person who's providing you the information. So as a responsible person and as a health professional, you have to be informed. You got to get yourself informed, and you got to look at things that you don't agree with. One of my bugbears was having to look at the research, the evidence-based research, on things that I instinctively knew to be just counterintuitive. They didn't make sense to me, but I still had to. I got told by so many very good people who had mentored me, you can't ignore it. Just because you don't like it, you can't ignore it.
Mm.
But it did make me very good at looking at what are the influences behind research, like who's paying for it, who
Absolutely.
wants the information.
I've done a lot of work in that area too, and it is fascinating. Yeah, who I mean, everyone has an ulterior motive for what they want the data to look like, because all the research is being done by corporations that have a financial vested interest to their shareholders to make money out of the data from the research that they're doing.
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, we used to think, I used to think that somehow university-based research was a little bit more kind of open and, you'd get more truth there. But of course, increasingly we realize who's funding all the universities.
Right.
So,
That's right.
oh, that's
Follow
right.
the money. Follow the money. Don't follow the science. Follow the money.
Yeah.
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 We
But,
really have a need for more independently financed research to go on. Yeah.
yeah.
Without any agendas, without any. I
Well,
mean,
true science.
smoking's the perfect example, right? For 30 years, they produced research paper after research paper to show that there was absolutely no link between lung cancer and smoking. And that went on for decades. And of course, America doesn't want to pay the huge lawsuits that would have come out of the true research, which they had all of the true research hidden away. But of course, that didn't match the data and wasn't going to bring the money into the shareholders that they wanted. And if Philip Morris hadn't actually stood up at some bizarre point and said, actually, it's all complete rubbish. We've been feeding you with lies for 30 years, and all the true research is here. And we've known for 30 years that it causes lung cancer and that there's huge links, and it's all glaringly obvious, and everything that you've been feeling and questioning is completely correct. If they hadn't done that, we could potentially still be in the dark on that, because they were the only ones doing the research, was the smoking companies,
Yeah.
and the cigarette companies. So there it was, the pure evidence that 3 decades of research was worth absolutely nothing, because it was done by a cigarette company that had a vested interest in a certain result coming out of that research that resulted in their shareholders earning a lot of money.
Yeah.
And so it's not science when it's lies.
No, and there's so much lies. It makes it very hard. I guess the next step for me is is learning actually how to trust, because I think the thing that happens for people when they start to really get swallowed up by all of the stuff that has been lies and all the stuff that they have believed to be true, and now they have to look at again, or and the shame and the guilt that sometimes we put ourselves through for believing stuff that, we just have to be so forgiving of ourselves because we only had the information we had to work with.
Yeah,
But of course, now we get to know more. So we need to move out of any kind of shame, guilt,
yeah,
anger complex and
yeah,
really get into a space where we can actually trust ourselves and then learn to trust outside of ourselves because, look, we've got an election coming up next year. That's, another kind of thing where you've got to question everything and you got to find a way forward. And then, I mean, that was probably not the right example because I'm so not okay. I'm still not sure at all where I am with any of that stuff.
yeah, yeah.
But I know that at some point I have to be able to learn to trust other people, and I'm gonna have to
Mm.
just have to use my instinct and my intuition.
It's your discernment. And so
Mm.
I would say, just as a final thing, that if you do start sort of questioning things, and I know a lot of people are questioning things now, especially but now that we've actually got COVID and now that it's actually raced through
Everyone's got
a
it.
nation of 95% VED people. But now that people have had it, and and I'm not dismissing the long COVID effects. I'm not dismissing that some people have had it very bad, and I know some of those people as well. But if you do start to question things and you're suddenly starting to go, I don't trust, this information I'm being given, don't violently swing to the other side without any discernment and start believing everything you see on the other side, because the other side is just as infiltrated, to be fair, and there's a whole load of clearly very trolled information being leaked out on both sides of the fence that's got people up in arms and believing all kinds of ridiculous stuff. And so, don't just swing wildly and think everything on the other side of the fence is true, because it's not. You have to use your discernment wherever you are on the scale in order to see what resonates. Just keep saying, can I take that? And if you can't, just put it in the curiosity box. And then just keep doing that. Bring it in, have a look at it, observe it without judgment, and then either put it in the curiosity box, take it, or throw it out. And just be doing one of those three things with everything that comes through.
That's right. And keep having the conversations with other people. Again, it's the same with them. You don't have to take everything that somebody else believes and
Yes.
disagree or agree with it, but you can listen. And, part of moving forward has to be that we start talking to each other about everything again.
Have to be able to debate.
Yeah.
We've just suddenly got to this very bizarre point again where it's like you're too scared to have a different opinion. It's like, oh, if I have a different opinion, I can't be friends with that person.
Yeah.
And that is absolutely ludicrous. I've got friends that have completely differing opinions to me. I've got family that has completely different opinions to me. And you have to be able to hold different opinions and still love someone.
Mm.
It's ludicrous. We will never ascend as a planet if we're all in the hive mindset, because one of the things that makes Earth so different and so exceptional and so amazing is that our DNA is able to create enormous variance in the way we think, which allows us to create enormously different technologies and art and science, and we are able to bring something different to the playing board from any level. And that's what makes us so interesting.
That was actually one of the main reasons I wanted to have this conversation. And now we're getting to the end of it, but I'm going to just drop it like a bomb. And it was really that, I'm seeing that we are activating different parts of our DNA that we haven't been activating previously. We are actually in this ascension process and in this way of questioning everything and waking up. We are finding different ways to awaken stuff that we already know within ourselves. And as we do that, honestly, oh God, I watched the Jubilee thing of the Queen lighting it, and it was a DNA strand double helix, but it was kind of like that. Is they think they're doing, the powers that be might think that they're doing all of these great, nasty, devious little things, and they're going to catch us. But actually, we are just like, light years ahead, because our DNA activation is already set off. And as one part lights up, the next part lights up. It's just an ongoing thing. And as we start to get that, and they're trying to pull us back with all this old news, this old vaccination stuff, whatever,
Yeah.
all their old ideas about things that they
Yeah.
think we still buy into, that we need to remember we're way far ahead of that, and we don't need to be scared, because they're stuck. We're moving, we're going forward, and they're stuck in one place. They can't get out of it because they don't know how to move forward. So to finish on that note of like having a real hope about, this is what ascension is. It is actually awakening your own ability, and it's not some etherical thing. It's literally in your DNA. Your
Yeah.
cells know. And when your cells know, it doesn't matter what they try and do to you.
Yeah.
There's just no getting away from the fact that the body is the perfect vehicle for this information. And the body knows how to heal itself. It knows how to gain the information. Some of us have soul contracts where we say, okay, we're getting off this train here. So
Yeah.
there's going to be, there will be people who get sick. There will be people who get injured. And there will be people who died. That is going to be the same no matter what we're looking at.
Yeah.
But yeah, hold that hope that you actually have everything you need, and that we are moving forward, and they can't, because they are stuck in a place that doesn't resonate any longer. So it can only exist for those who want to stay there.
Amen to that.
Yeah.
Boom.
I'm glad I got it in.
That's a whole other conversation, and it's a
It
really
really
good
is.
one. It's a really good one, though. We'll have to do another one on that.
Oh, hey, thank you so much again for joining. And
Oh,
it's always such a great thing to have these conversations. And I'm excited. I just feel like there's so much more coming, and
it's
I'm
so
sure
exciting, so
yeah.
uplifting. And I know we've got some more shit to work through, but you know what? That's totally fine. Like, bring it on,
It's
because
like, the more the shit that comes to us, and the more mucky and ugly it looks, it's just another opportunity to show that you choose to have your own experience, and that you choose your own sovereignty.
yeah,
So yeah, bring it on.
yeah, bring it on.
Yeah.
Fantastic. Thank you so much, Sarah. I love our chats.
Me too. Thanks, Mel. All right. Well, from my heart to your heart, and to the hearts of all of our viewers, thank you. Namaste.